Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when a Hollywood legend walks into a studio, unaware that he's about to be ambushed on live television? The air inside the ABC set feels rehearsed to perfection. Warm lights humming softly above. Audience murmurs blending with the crisp rustle of cards. Everything looks safe, predictable, controlled. But somewhere beneath that polished calm, a storm is quietly gathering strength. Clint Eastwood steps into frame like a man carved from another century. 94 years old, shoulders squared, his movements deliberate, precise. The crowd stirs as he takes a seat opposite George Stephanopoulos, the host, whose charm is as famous as his questions are sharp. Clint's weathered hands rest easily on his lap, but his pale blue eyes, those same eyes that once stared down villains on dusty frontier streets, are alert, scanning, reading the room. Across from him, Stephanopoulos offers that perfectly rehearsed television smile, the one that has comforted presidents and cornered senators. "Welcome back to the show, Clint," he says smoothly, his tone practiced, almost musical. He flips through his notes with a precision that feels more like choreography than curiosity. "Always a pleasure to have you here." Clint nods, polite, composed. His face reveals nothing, but inside the instincts that have guided him through decades in Hollywood are whispering warnings. Something about the host's energy tonight feels off. There's a glint in Stephanopoulos' eyes that doesn't belong in a simple promotional chat. The cameras roll. Red lights blink to life. The audience claps on cue, their smiles as bright as the stage lights washing over the set. To them, it's just another late-night segment. Another living legend doing the rounds to promote a new project. They can't sense the subtle shift, the temperature dropping, the tension coiling quietly between two men who both know this isn't going to be routine. "Your new documentary," Stephanopoulos begins, his voice measured but eager, explores what you call real American heroes. He leans forward just slightly, a predator close in the distance. Firefighters, teachers, soldiers. It's key to moving concept. Clint answers calmly. "Yeah, it's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Folks who put others before themselves. That's something I've always admired." His voice is gravel and steel, steady as a heartbeat. The audience nods. A few claps ripple through the room. So far, so good. But Stephanopoulos doesn't stop there. He studies Clint over the edge of his cue cards, a flicker of anticipation crossing his face. In today's political climate, he continues, tone soft but sharp and just enough to cut. Don't you think that kind of message might be seen as exclusionary? The word hangs in the air like gunpowder smoke. Exclusionary. It's subtle, but everyone who's ever seen Clint Eastwood in a standoff knows the sound of trigger being pulled. For a split second, the studio seems to freeze. The software of cameras, the faint hum of lights, every sound grows distant. Eastwood's eyes narrow, not in anger, but in awareness. He knows this terrain. He's been in this kind of fight before, though never under the glare of television lights this bright. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, George," he replies, his tone calm, almost disarming. "The film's about people who serve, no matter who they are or where they come from." Stephanopoulos smiles again, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Of course," he says lightly, "but some might argue your definition of heroism leaves certain people out." There it is, the first spark. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to change everything. Clint doesn't move, doesn't blink. His silence carries weight, the kind that draws every gaze toward him. Somewhere in the control room, a producer leans forward, sensing the shift. The tension has a pulse now. The audience doesn't know it yet, but they're no longer watching an interview. They're watching a duel in slow motion, and the first bullet has just left the chamber. The word still lingers in the air, exclusionary. Clint lets it sit there, heavy and deliberate, as if weighing whether it deserves an answer. The crowd has gone quiet, unsure if they're witnessing a polite conversation or the start of something sharper. The studio lights seem to burn hotter, reflecting off the polished desk between them, catching the lines etched deep across Eastwood's face. He doesn't fidget. He never does. He just looks at Stephanopoulos the way he's looked at 1,000 adversaries before, patient, unreadable, waiting for the next move. The film's not about politics. Clint finally says, his voice steady, every word deliberate. It's about people who step up when others step back. Teachers who stay late to help kids who are falling behind. Firefighters who run into buildings the rest of us are running out of. Soldiers who serve quietly without expecting applause. That's what I mean when I talk about heroes. It should have been enough for any other interview. That answer would have closed the topic neatly. But Stephanopoulos doesn't back down. Instead, he leans forward, eyes gleaming with something between curiosity and challenge. That's admirable, Clint, he says smoothly. But your definition of heroism, some might say it's a bit narrow. I mean, you've been known to express strong opinions about certain leaders, about movements that claim to fight for equality. Don't you think that makes your perspective on heroism a little complicated? There's a murmur in the audience, not loud, but noticeable. Everyone feels the temperature rising. Clint shifts slightly in his chair. The motion is small, but speaks volumes. His hands remain still on the armrests, but the muscles in his jaw tighten. I've got opinions, sure, he says. So does everyone. But that doesn't change what the documentary is about. It's about decency, sacrifice, people doing what's right when no one's watching. Stephanopoulos nods slowly like a man reeling in a fish. Right, he says softly, but context matters, doesn't it? You've had some interesting moments over the years, like the Republican National Convention. For example, the empty chair, the phrase lands like a slap. A few people in the crowd exchange glances. Even the camera operators seem to hold their breath. Clint's expression doesn't change immediately, but there's a subtle flicker in his eyes, a flash of irritation, maybe disbelief that they're really going there. He draws in a slow breath. That was commentary. He says, evenly, I've never claimed to be anything but a storyteller with opinions. I don't speak for anyone but myself. Stephanopoulos gives a short laugh, a sound too practiced to be genuine. Come on, Clint, he says, leaning forward again. You're not just a storyteller. You're Clint Eastwood. Your words carry weight. When you mock a sitting president on national television, people notice. That's not just entertainment. The silence that follows feels like gravity pressing down on the room. Even the applause sign above the audience remains unlit. Clint's eyes narrow slightly. His trademark squint, the same one that's frozen outlaws and studio executives alike. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. I didn't mock anyone, he says quietly. I made a point. You can call it what you want. That's your business. But don't twist what happened into something it wasn't. George smiles again, polite but cold. I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking what people are already thinking. For the first time, Clint looks directly into the host's eyes, holding the stare. There's no anger in it, only a calm. So absolute it becomes menacing. You're not asking, George, he says. The words slow, deliberate. You're assuming. A low ripple moves through the audience, half thrill, half discomfort. Stephanopoulos shifts slightly, trying to reassert control, but Clint's composure is immovable. The camera zooms in closer, catching the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, a warning more than a smile. The air in the studio feels electric now, every second stretching longer than it should. Somewhere in the control booth, a producer whispers, "We're live. Keep rolling." Stephanopoulos clears his throat, forcing a lighter tone. Well, he says, I suppose it wouldn't be a Clint Eastwood interview without a little drama. Clint doesn't answer. He just leans back in his chair, eyes locked, posture relaxed but ready, as if the next question might decide how far this duel will go. The room is silent, except for the faint buzz of the lights overhead. And then, in that stillness, he does it. He narrows his eyes, the faintest movement, the unmistakable signal of a man who's just been challenged. The kind of look that says, if you want to fight, son, you've got one. The air between them is no longer neutral. It's thick now, charged, alive with unspoken challenge. Stephanopoulos doesn't blink. He smells blood in the water. You've spent decades shaping how Americans see themselves, he says, voice smooth as glass. Through your films, through your words. That kind of influence, doesn't it come with responsibility? Especially when your views reach millions. Flint leans back slightly, his eyes steady, his tone calm, but edged with warning. The right to speak, he says, is what makes this country great. Everyone has a voice. Mine's no different from anyone else's. But when your words divide, Stephanopoulos interrupts, smiling that tight, calculated smile again. When they make some people feel smaller, less American, doesn't that concern you? Each question hits like a bullet, measured, deliberate, aimed to wound, not understand. The crowd senses it, too. The friendly applause and laughter from earlier have vanished. There's only silence now, the kind that hums in the bones. Clint doesn't flinch. He inhales once, slow, unhurried, and lets the breath out through his nose. Maybe, he says quietly, they're afraid of the truth. A hush falls so deep it feels physical. Even the crew stops moving. Stephanopoulos blinks just once, the rhythm of the interview thrown off for a heartbeat, then recovering. He leans forward again, his tone dropping an octave, feigning reason. The truth, he repeats, or your version of it. Because Clint, sometimes context matters. That word again, context. It hangs in the air like a chalet. Clint nods slowly, eyes never leaving Stephanopoulos' face. You're right, he says. Context always matters, but it's the first thing people throw away when they want to build a story instead of tell the truth. Stephanopoulos tilts his head, mock sympathy playing across his face. So, you're saying the media is a problem? He asks, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp as blades. I'm saying, Clint replies, voice still low, still even, that pulling words out of an old interview and dressing them up for outrage doesn't make anyone smarter. It just makes people angry. The host chuckles softly, pretending to brush it off, but the tension in his jaw betrays him. Come on, Clint, he says. You can't deny your comments on immigration, on social movements. Those things left a mark. Some say they did real harm. Now it's Clint who leans forward. The lights hit the hard lines of his face. Every crease like a map of the years he's lived through. You can say a lot of things, he murmurs, but you can't say I've ever told people what to think. I make movies. I talk. I listen. What people take from that, that's on them. Stephanopoulos' smile fades, replaced by something colder. So, no regrets. Regrets. Clint repeats the word as if tasting it. I regret that people stop listening the moment they hear something they don't like. The camera is zooming close enough to catch the faint tightening around his eyes. He's not angry. He's beyond that. It's the kind of calm that comes after a lifetime of staring down storm. Stephanopoulos doesn't let up. That's a convenient answer. He says, but when you speak, people listen. They take your words as truth. Doesn't that give you some kind of moral duty? Clint's gaze doesn't move. My duty, he says, is to be honest, not agreeable. For the first time, the host looks momentarily unsure. He shifts in his seat, crossing one leg over the other, flipping through his cards though he's not reading them. Honesty is subjective, isn't it? He asks almost of himself. Not when you live it, Clint replies, his voice now a whisper of gravel and certainty. The line hits harder than a shout. It lands somewhere deep, echoing through the quiet studio. Stephanopoulos clears his throat, trying to keep his tone light. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Clint says. It just isn't easy. For a moment, even the cameras seem to hesitate. Their quiet mechanical were the only sound in the room. Stephanopoulos glances offstage. His producers are frozen, unsure if they should cut the commercial or let the fireworks continue. Then he forces a small laugh, the kind meant to reset the mood. Well, we're certainly having an interesting conversation tonight, he says, though his eyes betray irritation. But let's be clear, you've said some things over the years that upset people. Would you say you stand by all of them? Clint leans forward, elbows on his knees now, his stare unwavering. You're twisting my words, he says, each syllable sharp as a knife. You're not asking questions, George. You're building a case. It's not shouted, but it slices through the air like a clean break in a piece of glass. Stephanopoulos opens his mouth, but nothing comes out right away. He wasn't expecting the counterpunch. The audience shifts uneasily in their seats. They can feel that something fundamental has changed. This isn't an interview anymore. It's a duel fought with sentences and silence. The host recovers, straightens his papers, tries to smile again. No case, he says, forcing lightness into his tone. Just journalism. Clint doesn't blink. Then you should know, he says quietly, journalism isn't supposed to sound like an interrogation. The line lands heavy, and for the first time, George Stephanopoulos looks like the man on defense. The red light above the camera burns on, recording every second. And in that moment, everyone in the room knows it. This conversation has just crossed the line, and there's no going back. The silence after Clint's last words hangs heavy, the kind of silence that hums in the ears. Stephanopoulos breaks it with a short, tight laugh that doesn't reach his eyes. You know, Clint, he says, voice light, but edged with something harder. I think part of the problem is that you're stuck in the past. The world's changed. The conversations have changed. But you're still fighting yesterday's battles. The words drop like stones into a still pond. Even the camera crew seems to stop breathing. Clint doesn't move right away. He just looks at Stephanopoulos. And when he finally speaks, his voice is low, steady, and carries the weight of nearly a century. I've lived through more history than you can imagine, he says. I've seen this country at its best and at its worst. I've seen it tear itself apart and find a way to heal again. You want to talk about change? I've seen it. I've worked through it. I've lived it. His tone isn't angry. It's something deeper, almost weary, like a man tired of watching the same mistakes play out over and over again. I grew up during the Depression. He continues. Watch families scrape by with nothing. I served in the Army during Korea. Came home, dug swimming pools, logged trees, took every job that would keep food on the table. Then I went to work in a business that told me I was too tall, too quiet, too something to make it. But I did. I kept showing up. I didn't quit. The audience is silent now, leaning forward. The lights feel hotter, harsher, as if they too are listening. You say I'm stuck in the past. Clint says, maybe that's because the past taught me things worth remembering, like hard work, responsibility, integrity. Those aren't old ideas, George. They're the reason we got this far. Stephanopoulos shifts in his chair, crossing one leg over the other, his composure faltering just slightly. But what about when those same institutions you defend fail people? He presses. When justice isn't equal, when the system you believe in leaves people behind. You can't deny that. Clint's eyes narrow again, that familiar squint returning not of anger, but of focus. You're right, he says quietly. The system fails sometimes. People fail sometimes. But that's not an excuse to tear it all down. You fix what's broken. You don't burn the whole house because one window's cracked. Stephanopoulos tilts his head, his tone turning sharp. But what if the house was never built for everyone? For the first time, Clint leans forward, elbows resting on his knees, his voice dropping into that frankly register that once stopped villains in their tracks. Then you rebuild it stronger, he says. You don't give up on the foundation. You make it better. That's what this country does. That's what we've always done. His words hang there, simple but unyielding. Stephanopoulos smiles thinly, his expression unreadable. You make it sound easy, he says. But to a lot of people, it's not that simple. Your positions, your statements, they sound like nostalgia for a time that's gone. Maybe that's why people think you've been left behind by progress. Clint chuckles softly, the sound low and knowing. Left behind by progress. He repeats, shaking his head. Son, I was making movies about racial reconciliation and second chances when you were still reading other people's homework. Don't talk to me about progress. I've lived it. I filmed it. I fought for it in my own way. The audience reacts with a murmur, half shock, half admiration. Stephanopoulos straightens in his chair, his smile tightening. Still, he says, you have to admit your views sometimes clash with modern America. Modern America, Clint says, his tone turning colder. You mean the one where people shout each other down instead of listening? Where the truth takes a backseat to ratings. That's not progress, George. That's noise. Something breaks in the host's calm facade. His next words come faster, more defensive. This isn't about ratings, he says sharply. It's about accountability. You have a platform, Clint, you can't just show up and tell your version of heroism without being challenged on what it means. Clint's reply is a whisper, but it cuts through the air like a blade. You didn't invite me here to talk about heroism, he says. You invited me here under false pretenses. The words hit like an explosion. The audience gasps. In the control booth, producers exchange panicked looks, hands flying across switchboards. Stephanopoulos' smile falters completely now, replaced by something raw, something caught off guard. Clint doesn't move. He just keeps talking, his voice steady, almost eerily calm. You told my people this was going to be a conversation about the documentary, about real people doing real things. But that's not what this is. You came here to make a point, not to ask one. Stephanopoulos leans forward, eyes flashing. I'm just doing my job, he says quickly. Clint shakes his head. Slow, deliberate. No, you're doing a performance. You're not interviewing me. You're auditioning for outrage. The line lands hard. Even the boom mic operator looks down, suddenly aware of the heat in the room. Stephanopoulos opens his mouth to respond, but Clint doesn't give him the chance. You see, that's the difference between you and me, he says. I don't need a script to say what I mean, and I don't need to tear someone down to make myself look smart. The words settle like smoke after gunfire. The tension is unbearable now. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer whispers, "Go to commercial," but no one dares move. Clint leans back, folds his hands, and stares across the table at the man who just lost control of his own show. His voice drops again, quiet but unmistakable. Principle don't change just because fashion does. The audience doesn't applaud. They don't breathe. They just sit there caught in the gravity of what's happening. In the span of a few minutes, the power in the room has shifted. The legend they thought was cornered has just turned the tables. Stephanopoulos glances toward the camera, searching for a lifeline, but it's too late. The scene has already written itself. The breaking point has arrived, and Clint Eastwood isn't the one who broke. For a long, trembling moment, neither man speaks. The lights hum, the cameras roll, and every face in the studio turns toward the legend, sitting perfectly still under the heat. Stephanopoulos blinks first. The polite veneer has cracked. His voice rises thinner now, more defensive. That is serious accusation. Clint, he says, leaning forward. Are you suggesting I've been dishonest? Clint doesn't look away. His expression is carved from stone. When he finally answers, his voice is quiet, almost gentle. But every word lands like a hammer. I'm not suggesting anything, he says. I'm stating it. You've been dishonest from the moment I walked in here. This whole thing, this ambush, dressed up as journalism. It's beneath you. A low gasp moves through the audience. The producer in the booth waves frantically for a commercial break, but Stephanopoulos ignores him. The host forces a thin smile, trying to recover his composure. Come on, he says quickly. This is an ambush. You came here voluntarily. You knew there'd be questions. Clint leans forward slightly, hands clasped, his gaze locked and unflinching. Questions are fine, he says. But this... He gestures toward the stack of highlighted papers in Stephen's hand. This is theater. This is a setup. The room goes still. Even the lights seem to hum quieter. Then softly, almost too softly, he adds, "This isn't journalism, son. This is a hit job." The words echo through the air like a gunshot in a canyon. Stephanopoulos freezes, the smile dying completely on his face. Somewhere in the audience, someone exhales sharply. The cameras zoom in, capturing the glint in Clint's eyes. A glint that's not anger, not pride, but something older. Disappointment. Stephanopoulos shifts forward, voice rising now, his control slipping. So that's it, he snaps. You accuse me of a hit job because you don't like being challenged. Because the questions get tough? The tension in the room snaps like a wire pulled too tight. Clint doesn't flinch. He just stares at the host with a look that could freeze fire. You think these are tough questions? He says slowly. Son, I've been shot at, sued, and slandered. I've stood in front of cameras for 70 years. Tough questions don't scare me. He reaches for his microphone. The audience stirs. Stephanopoulos realizes what's happening and tries to regain control. Clint, hold on. We're in the middle of a live broadcast. You can't just, but Clint is already unclipping the mic from his lapel. His voice, when it comes, is calm. Absolute. Nobody forced me to stay. The words hang in the air like smoke. The studio goes silent. The cameras tremble slightly as operators scramble to follow his movement. He rises slowly, deliberately, with the same measured grace he's carried on screen for half a century. At 94, every motion carries weight. Every step is poetry and defiance. Steven's voice cracks as he tries to fill the space. So that's it. You're walking away from accountability, from the questions. Clint turns his head, the lights catching the lines on his face, the quiet power in his eyes. He doesn't speak right away. When he does, his tone is low, steady, unshakable. "No, George," he says. "I'm not walking away from questions. I'm walking away from a bully." The words land like a final verdict. The studio audience is frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. No one moves. No one dares breathe. Clint stands there for a moment longer, then turns toward the edge of the stage. His footsteps echo across the floor, slow, deliberate, resonant. Each one sounds heavier than the last, as if the air itself thickens around him. The camera follows, but the frame trembles as though even the equipment can feel the gravity of what's happening. Stephanopoulos calls after him, voice desperate now. "You can't just walk off, Clint. This isn't how the conversation ends." Clint stops at the threshold of the stage, half-turned, his profile caught perfectly in the golden light. The silence in the room deepens until it feels sacred. He looks back, his expression unreadable, and says quietly, "Conversation ended when you stopped listening." Then he walks away. No dramatic flourish, no raised voice, just that calm, unyielding stride, the same stride that once walked across the plains of movie sets and into cinematic legend. The boom operator lowers his mic. The producer presses both hands to his headset, whispering, "Stay on him. Stay on him." The audience doesn't move until the heavy studio door swings shut behind him, the sound echoing like the last note of a song that can't be replayed. Stephanopoulos sits frozen at his desk, his script scattered, his expression blank. He forces a half-hearted smile toward the camera, but it's clear the moment is gone. The control he prided himself on has slipped through his fingers. Around him, the studio feels hollow, stripped of its polish. And somewhere in that vast silence, the audience begins to understand what they've just witnessed. Clint Eastwood didn't storm out in anger. He walked out in principle. He didn't lose his temper. He reclaimed his dignity. Outside the studio, his footsteps fade into the distance, slow and steady. The rhythm of a man who said everything he needed to say. Inside, Stephanopoulos stares into the camera's unblinking eye, searching for words that won't come. The red light stays on, burning quietly in the void he's left behind. Each beat of silence is louder than applause. Each second that passes feels like an eternity. The legend has left the stage, and all that remains is the echo of his final words, reverberating through the room like a promise carved in stone. He wasn't walking away from a fight. He was walking away from a noise. For a few endless seconds, the studio doesn't move. The air feels hollow, emptied of sound and breath. George Stephanopoulos sits frozen behind his desk, the color drained from his face, his hands resting uselessly on his cart. The red light above the main camera blinks steadily, demanding a show that no longer exists. He opens his mouth to speak, but nothing comes out. His voice, so polished and practiced, has abandoned him. The audience stays silent at first, stunned by what they've just witnessed. Then slowly, a few people begin to clap. It's hesitant, uncertain, like the echo of something sacred. And then it spreads. The sound builds, not thunderous, but honest, a low, respectful applause that fills the void Clint Eastwood left behind. They aren't clapping for spectacle. They're clapping because they saw something real. Behind the cameras, the crew stands motionless. The director's hand hovers above the switchboard, unsure whether to cut the feed or let it run. The control room buzzes with confused voices, producers arguing in whispers about damage control, about headlines, about what this moment means. But no one can bring themselves to stop the broadcast. No one wants to be the first to break the silence. Stephanopoulos finally blinks, still staring at the empty space across from him. The chair where Clint had sat remains perfectly framed in the camera shot. The microphone lies coiled on the seat, its cable dangling like a discarded snake. The spotlight catches the empty cushion, and for a fleeting instant, it feels less like a piece of furniture and more like an altar, a quiet monument to what just happened. The camera lingers the way cameras sometimes do when they understand before humans do that something irreversible has occurred. There's no music, no graphics, no transition. Just that empty chair glowing under the hot white lights. And in that stillness, the truth settles in. In trying to break a legend, Stephanopoulos has broken the illusion of journalism itself. The applause fades, leaving only the soft hum of the studio equipment. Stephanopoulos clears his throat, his voice finally returning, but thinner now, stripped of confidence. "We'll be right back," he says weakly, but the words sound meaningless. The screen doesn't cut to commercial. It stays on the empty seat a moment longer, as if refusing to let the moment go. The light shifts, dimming slightly, catching the edges of dust in the air, where Clint's presence still lingers. It feels like the whole room is holding its breath, reverent, unsure whether it just witnessed a disaster or a piece of history. The camera pulls back slowly, the frame widening until the empty chair becomes just one small part of the vast silent stage. There's nothing left to say, nothing left to prove. That night, integrity didn't lose it, simply walked away.